Hey everyone, how's it going? So today what I wanted to do was look at World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV to take a look at their PvP systems. WoW is well known for its PvP, and Final Fantasy XIV recently had a significant revamp. So I felt like now would be a great time to take a look at them. So let's just jump right in and start with World of Warcraft. I'm going to be perfectly honest here, I've never really gravitated towards PvP in WoW. And that is for a variety of reasons, mostly to do with how the PvP was incorporated. I'll get more into that in a bit, but first, let's start with looking at what kind of PvP WoW has on offer. The first is World PvP. This kind of PvP has changed a lot since vanilla, specifically the way it was on PvP servers. On a PvP server, you were basically signing up to be hunted anytime and anywhere. Nowadays, it is purely optional, and players get to choose when and if they are attackable. This kind of made World PvP pointless, since you never have to worry about another player coming after you. The only reason I am bringing this up is because the old World PvP had such a negative impact on me that I almost quit well before I got to the level cap. But I'll get more into that later. The second type of PvP is Battlegrounds, which is the objective-based PvP. This can be broken down into capture the flag, capture the enemy base, defeat the enemy commanders. I think you get the idea. There are 13 different battlegrounds of varying map sizes and team sizes, so there is quite the variety here. Now, whenever I felt like PvPing, or, had to PvP, I would usually do the battlegrounds. I just vastly prefer objective-based PvP over the arena style. I also like that when you die in Battlegrounds, it's not just over. It's a short wait, and then you are right back into the action. And that brings us to the last form, the Arena. Arena is broken down into 2v2 and 3v3. There are 12 different environments for arenas, so yet again, quite the variety here. Your goal is to be the last team standing. And, if you are burst down right at the start of the match, you get the pleasure of watching your team try to win without you. The final thing that is worth mentioning here is that there is also rated PvP, for both Battlegrounds and Arena. Your team's rating dictates the kind of gear that is accessible to you, and what kind of teams that you will be facing. The higher your rating, the better the teams you will face, but also the better the gear you will get. Now, the reason I had issues with WoW PvP is because I had so many negative experiences because of how WoW designed and incorporated PvP into their game. So, I actually started WoW on a PvP server, way back in vanilla. Not the classic servers, the original game. I think anyone who has done that will know where I am coming from when I say it was an absolute nightmare. I could sum up the experience as this. Max level players plus lower level players equals being ganked over and over and over again. They never seemed to get tired of this. And that was my experience, and the experience of many others, I am sure. And it was awful. Not fun, even in the slightest, and I have no idea how this wasn't treated as harassment. Now, I know the old argument. You signed up for it when you went to a PvP server. That was all over the forums back then. But I wholeheartedly disagree with that sentiment. That type of behavior was obnoxious, made playing the game nearly impossible, and I stand by that it was online harassment. Now, it would have been one thing if the player ganked you and then moved on, but that never seemed to be the case. They would hound over your freshly ganked corpse, and then also make sure to cover the graveyard. Those gankers, they were diligent, that's for sure. Now, this is not really a problem anymore, but that doesn't remove the experiences that I had. This was my first experience with PvP in World of Warcraft, and it was so bad that I almost quit. Now, you might wonder why I gravitated towards a PvP server in the first place, when PvP wasn't something I really wanted to do. That was because PvP servers were the hardcore servers, and that was where all the best PvE guilds went. I wanted to raid and run dungeons with a good guild, so I felt like there was really no choice in the matter. a running theme here. There was also the fact that gear obtained in PvP could be so useful in PvE, and being the serious raider I was, in the serious raiding guild I was in, getting that gear became necessary. How can you turn down a piece of gear that could vastly improve your performance? So I often would feel forced to do PvP. The biggest example I can give was in Battle for Azeroth, when I had to get a particular essence for my Heart of Azeroth. And if all of that sounded like gibberish to you, what I was aiming to get was an insane DPS boost from my class. It was called Blood for Blood, and it gave 25% crit for 10 seconds, and increased critical damage by 25% for 5 seconds. I know Blizzard have fixed this recently, and now PvP gear effectiveness is drastically lowered for PvE content, and the other way around as well, and I think that's a great change. Blizzard listened to the players' feedback and did something about it. I just wish they would have done something about it sooner. But hey, better late than never, right? Now, another thing I don't like, and this is a personal preference thing, but I don't like that gear has any bearing on performance. I know that some players really like that aspect, and gear progression can be really fun, but it's not something that I look for in PvP. I don't know, isn't it better and more fun when everyone is equal? Also, sometimes balance can be pretty, iffy. Some classes just have a much easier time stomping players due to abilities just doing ridiculous amounts of damage. A great example of this was Balance Druids in 9.0. They had an ability called Convoke the Spirits, and with this ability they were easily able to just delete players without much effort. It would be one thing if everyone had a delete the player type of ability, but the game really isn't designed to be that way. Especially in Arena, where being KO'd, that just means you are out of the game. And finally, I am also not the hugest fan of all the crowd control that goes on in WoW's PvP. Between being stunned, rooted, polymorphed, knocked down, knocked back, feared, slowed. It's just so much loss of control of your character, and I just find that to be very obnoxious. I know that you can use abilities to get out of some of them, and there's also diminishing returns, but I still really don't like it, and it's such a huge part of WoW's PvP. And so, those are some of the reasons why PvP in WoW just didn't do it for me. I am not saying I never had fun. There were certainly times in Battlegrounds where I was having fun, but mostly, PvP just felt like a chore that I had to do. And so that's everything with WoW for now, so let's take a look at Final Fantasy XIV. So, the PvP in Final Fantasy XIV had a huge revamp, where they made drastic improvements. This was needed. The PvP before the revamp, well, it was serviceable I suppose, but now it's actually pretty great. So, what did they do in this revamp? Well, they completely reworked the job actions for PvP, they gave them some fine-tuning, and they also added a fantastic new mode called Crystalline Conflict. Something that I really like about 14's PvP is that the job actions, or, abilities, that you use in PvP are different than what you'd use in PvE. Abilities' functionality are altered, and a lot of the abilities that you have in PvE are not used in PvP. Now, this might be a little confusing at first, since you have to make a separate PvP hotbar and then read how the abilities now work in PvP. But the good news is that things are mostly simplified. As an example, on my Red Mage, my rotation for doing damage in PvP is really just pressing 4 different buttons, and one of those is the Limit Break, which is an ability that you don't press all that often. I'll get more into that in a little bit. Just a bit of an editor's note here, I realize I didn't mention this in the WoW section, but there are abilities in World of Warcraft that are PvP only as well. You choose them from a list of traits and abilities that you can use in PvP. Okay, so back to the video. This means that instead of focusing on a complicated rotation and having to keep track of multiple cooldowns, you can really just focus on the match and what you need to be doing. I really like that. It also means that with PvP only actions, such as guard and self-heals, there isn't going to be that ability bloat. I mean, in PvE, some rotations have 30 plus different actions. I don't know if that would be a fun thing to try to execute on a player. Now, another thing I think is really cool about 14's PvP is the aforementioned limit breaks. So a limit break in PvP is a separate bar that every player has, and it fills up as you fight. When your bar is full, you can unleash a devastating attack on your enemies. Limit breaks are very powerful, and every job has a unique one that they get to use. They don't one-shot a full health player on their own, but they will take off a decent chunk of HP. Now, if your teams coordinate their limit breaks, well, then a lot of devastation can be caused, with many KOs on the opposing team, easily turning the course of the battle in your favor. But then you also have to remember that the other team also has limit breaks, so they can easily return the favor. So it never really feels all that unfair. Now, when it came to the new mode, I went into Crystalline Conflict expecting it not to change my thoughts on PvP at all, but instead it just blew me out of the water. It proved to be so addictive and just so much more fun than I ever expected. I think the reason why I had so much fun is, it's a simple mode with an easy to understand premise. You have a crystal in the center, and you want to move it to the enemy's base. This is done by having more of your team in the vicinity of the crystal than the opposing team does. Because it's simple, anyone can jump in and know what they need to do without an explanation. You don't need to go to YouTube or some wiki to learn how to play. It's very intuitive. I think some of the best games are like this. I mean, Tetris is a very simple game, but it's still a hell of a lot of fun. Now, if you want to become really good at Crystalline Conflict, then maybe you'd want to do some research on how to perform better, and look up some strategies to help you get more wins. Another good thing, at least in my opinion, is the matches are very fast-paced. Most of the matches I've done clocked in under 5 minutes. The action starts right away, and you are immediately presented with how does your team go about overwhelming the other team? Who do you focus on first? When will you use your limit breaks? Do you try flanking the other team, or regrouping? Anyways, there are 3 maps at the moment, and 2 of them have some environmental hazards that really help spice up the matches. One of those is Bomberman-like bombs go off, so you have to be aware of where those are so you aren't in the line of fire. And the other one has these wind traps that toss you up into the air, like a ragdoll, and then you take massive fall damage. Like I said before, it's a lot of fun, and the matches go by so fast that even if you lose, you can just jump right back in and try again. So, there are 2 other PvP modes in Final Fantasy XIV. One of those is Frontlines, which are bigger battlegrounds than Crystalline Conflict, where you have 3 teams of 24 fighting each other, which means you have 72 players on the field in total. It can be very chaotic in there. There are 4 maps for this at the moment, and each have a similar goal, but you go about it in slightly different ways, such as capturing points, or destroying resources, or defeating as many players as you can at specific points. Anyways, this isn't exactly my favorite mode. I've pretty much just used it as a way to gain extra experience points for other jobs, since it is in the daily roulette. And lastly, there's Rival Wings, which is currently unavailable. With the PvP revamp, the devs needed extra time to balance this mode, and unfortunately, I didn't try it when it was previously available. From what I've read and seen, in this mode your objective is to take over the enemy's tower, and you can summon machines to help you do that. It does look like a lot of fun, and I'm willing to give it a go when it's finally available again. I do think I would like this more than Frontlines, because it's only 2 teams, and the amount of players on the field is less. I don't know, I just find the Frontlines chaos factor to be a bit too much for me to enjoy. So, I want to be crystal clear here. Pun intended. I am not saying WoW PvP is bad. It's just not something that I enjoyed. And a lot of that is because of the negative experiences. But at the end of the day, I wasn't having much fun whenever I PvP'd. Or, I should say, the amount of times I was enjoying myself was overshadowed by the times that I was not. I honestly just thought MMO PvP was not for me, and it never would be. And then 14 came around with its revamp. I tried Crystalline Conflict, and I've had more fun in this mode than I ever thought possible. Final Fantasy XIV showed me that I could have lots of fun with MMO PvP, which was a pretty big surprise. At the end of the day, the PvP in these 2 games is pretty different. The developers seem to have very different goals for what their PvP systems do. It's possible to enjoy both, but if you are like me and didn't like PvP in World of Warcraft, you might just like it in Final Fantasy XIV. Anyways, that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think of the PvP of these games in the comments below. And if you liked what you saw and want to see more, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. Thanks again, and take care.